10 reasons why your 20s suck. There's so much going on in the world right now, and I want you all to know that this is not a negative video. The purpose of this video is to let you all know that you are not the only one. I felt so isolated and I've been blaming myself for all of these things, and I saw a few videos on TikTok recently about being in your 20s that made me realize I wasn't the only one. And sometimes just having that in itself is extremely important and powerful. Being aware that these things are pressures that a lot of other people feel and that they're universal, I feel like that in itself is so comforting. So I wanted to make a video about this. Before I get into this video though, I know this is super serious and a really bad segue. I'm giving away a Polaroid, and all you have to do is follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Jessie Paege and be commenting all of the rainbow emojis. Basically just be super active. Super active, I'm watching you. Don't have to be super active in the gym, that's okay. I'm not. But you do have to be super active on my Instagram or else. Okay, anyways. I went from soft Jessie to daddy. Actually, I'm always daddy, so. I guess my last video hit a ton of people that don't normally watch my content, and a lot of the comments were like, you know, after watching this girl for 18 minutes, I can confirm she is daddy. Anyway, I'm gonna get into the video. Friendships. I'm in a 3D world where the people have no dimension. You suddenly go from seeing your friends every single day in school and then hanging out on the weekends at dance class, whatever it may be, to seeing your friends in your 20s once a month. Obviously, there are exceptions, but you do see your friends less often, and it makes sense. A lot of your friends work these 9-to-5 jobs, and then they have a partner, a long-term partner they probably live with, and they don't get to do date night until it's the weekend, and suddenly you barely see your friends. Maybe you see them 12 times every year, and it's lonely. It's extremely lonely. You feel uncomfortable when all of your friends have partners, and you are single in your 20s. You suddenly realize you are the odd number in the friend group, the person without a partner with them. You're watching fireworks and everyone turns to their partner and you're kinda sitting there alone and you're like, yep, this is where I'm at. It's so hard to set boundaries when you're in your 20s because it's so hard to find someone that wants to be in your life in the first place. When you do find that person, you want to stick to them, and it is hard to set those boundaries. 2, the pressure to go out. My daddy told me this isn't the way God intended me to be. He tries to mold me. I do not drink. I am 23 years old. I don't drink. There's some old videos of me where I like reacted to some homophobic TikToks and I did drink in those, but I have not drank anything in about a year, and I don't plan on drinking. I have some childhood trauma issues that relate to that, but even beyond that, there is this pressure to drink as a person in your 20s. We live in such a depressing world right now, and alcohol is a depressant. It is extremely scary to live in this world and feel that euphoric feeling after drinking and then have it all go away in a second. And I'm not saying you can't drink, but for someone that doesn't drink or someone that shouldn't be drinking and feels that pressure, it's really scary. It's very terrifying. You're told you need to spend a lot of time alone in your 20s, but you're also told that you need to go out and have fun and do everything. So where is that line? No one knows. Everyone's figuring it out. But there is this social expectation for where that line must be. Spending a Friday night alone is one of my favorite things, yet I feel guilty for it. I remember the first time I ever heard someone else in their 20s say that they don't drink, and they just flat out said it, I don't drink. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could tell someone in a situation that you don't drink and just not feel any guilt around it. You could just make that statement and not have people question it and not feel like you've done something wrong, or even that that was an option in your 20s, because there's so much pressure to drink when ultimately that is your choice. Dating! Yeah! Ugh. I think if you are someone that dates when you were in high school or middle school, there's something that is light and less stressful about it. But then once you're in your 20s, there is this, you need to have that dating experience. You need to have your first relationship. You know, if you come out of the closet, if you're an LGBTQ plus person, you have to confirm that with the world by being in a relationship and having those experiences. And it takes away the fun. These are all just my personal experiences, but you are surrounded by people that are in these long-term relationships and you're like, why is that not me? What does that say about myself? Time is running out. You hear all the time from your parents, your grandparents, where's your partner? What are you doing? Or you're shamed for figuring out your sexuality in your 20s. You know, it's considered late, when I don't think it's true at all. I think that there is no certain time you have to do any certain thing. For me personally, I didn't date in high school or middle school really. And then suddenly I was like, I'm in my 20s. I haven't had a long-term relationship. What's wrong with me? And that's why I recommend getting kitties. Meow, meow, meow. So we're expected to go on these apps where you never know if the person actually cares about you. You don't know how casual or serious things are, and it is so hard to find someone in their 20s that wants something serious, that is single as well. You're a part of me left infected when I was broken, limbo together. You said forever, never thought you meant it. Now I don't see it. It's getting better till I cut you out. Like a sickness I forgot about. You lose friends to relationships. They become invested in their relationships. You basically feel like you lose these friends, and you feel like you would still maybe have them in your life if you also were in a committed relationship. As your 20s progress, for some reason there is this pressure to find that longer term relationship, when the person you are at age 22 versus 25 can be completely different, and everyone is on a totally different life course. I think it's even scarier to rush dating, because that's when you get in these extremely toxic, depressing relationships where you feel so stuck in them because you've been in them so long. And I think there is something that is incredibly liberating about making sure your relationships are important and right for you and waiting. But it's hard when this society doesn't allow for people in their 20s to feel like they should be waiting. I know so many people that have been in relationships for 3 to 4 years and they're in their 20s, and then I'm completely single and I'm like, I need to find that soon. Being an adult is insanely expensive. Not only is everything monetarily expensive, but also your time is suddenly expensive when you're so busy and you're making food so you can save money. You can do this to save money, but then you're giving your time and suddenly you realize you have no time for anything and you still didn't save any money, and it's scary. It is so scary. You feel guilty for being exhausted because your time and money is so valuable. If you have a long day of working and you're exhausted and you want to order in, you feel guilty because you know that's more expensive, or you have to force yourself to cook a meal, or you have to make a meal that isn't the healthiest and you feel horrible after. You don't even realize how expensive it was to go to the doctor as a child. You realize therapy is insanely expensive, something that we all really need, just point blank based off of the world that we're living in right now. I think we've all experienced trauma, even if you didn't experience it as a kid, even if you are extremely privileged, just living in this world. I think every single person needs therapy right now, but it is so expensive and it's hard to not feel exhausted from it. It's something that you were doing for yourself, but you can't help but feel guilty. When I was little, I grew up hearing my parents feel so inferior to other parents. I saw that comparison and I brought it into my own life then. I compared myself to the other kids in my class. Why does so-and-so have a pool and I don't have a pool in my backyard? Why does Lisa have a pair of Uggs and I don't have a pair of Uggs? When I was so young, you know, know, when those comparisons become so much bigger than someone owning a pair of Uggs or having a bigger house, it becomes their life. It's almost dystopian how different people's lives can be in their 20s, because when you're in second grade, chances are the other kids your age are also in second grade. One kid might do dance class, one kid might come from a richer family, but you all have a similar-ish lifestyle, at least compared to when you're in your 20s. When one 23-year-old is literally curing cancer, you see someone your age having a child and they are married and you are extremely single and exhausted from dating apps. That is the complete difference. Suddenly those kids that were wealthier than you in school, suddenly it's that they have a different life than you because they came from a super wealthy family and they're traveling the world and not worrying about college debt, and you're staying at home doing your best to just make it by and not be exhausted. There's this pressure that some 20-year-olds have and some 20-year-olds don't, and it feels so unfair and it's impossible not to compare. Suddenly Lisa having Uggs and you not having Uggs is the cherry on top. It's the very tiny little piece of the puzzle. You suddenly become too old for these healthy coping mechanisms that you used to love. During the pandemic, I watched all my favorite old TV shows, all my favorite animes I watched when I was a child, things like that, and suddenly when you're an adult, you're supposed to consume these intellectual movies all the time, and you can still love those films, but it's not weird to keep those healthy coping mechanisms from when you were young, because especially in your 20s where you feel like you're stuck between two worlds, sometimes it's really nice to feel like you can tap into those things that you loved when you were younger, but you get called cringe and looked down upon. I love watching kids' cartoons, not in a creepy way. It's because sometimes it's kind of nice to hear humor that isn't dark and about the current world we're living in and, you know, super vulgar. Sometimes it's really nice to just get some super light humor from a kid's show. It feels like it's in your control, it's constant, you know what happens. And that's not to say you can't ever consume intellectual media, but as a 20-year-old, you're allowed to play Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube, watch Barbie movies, eat dinosaur chicken nuggets for dinner. I don't know, it doesn't matter. There's nothing creepy about it unless you're doing it for some other weird reason, I don't know. But if you need to just forget that the world is changing and just go back to something that felt comfortable for you when you were young and you didn't have these pressures, you are absolutely allowed to do that. But when you're in your 20s for some reason that is looked down upon. I love rewatching Shrek, as you all know. That's something that I struggle with as a 20-something-year-old, is feeling immature, and that's not true. If anything, you might be an incredibly mature person that feels everything, and that is the issue, and you need to just take a second to just enjoy something that you used to love and feel that nostalgia. Disappearances. Your life can change so much in your 20s versus as a teenager. This is different for every person, you know, some people might switch schools a lot, some people might be in the foster care system, there's so many different experiences, but as a 20-year-old, you might be switching jobs every month. With that, you have to switch friend groups every month, just like if you were switching schools. If you didn't experience that as a kid, it can be a lot to experience that in your 20s. When you went to school and you saw the same people every day, if you were in a fight with your best friend, you had to kind of figure it out because you were in classes together, or if you missed them and you were on a break, they were still there. But it's so easy for someone to disappear from your life completely when you're in your 20s, and if they're really bad at communicating, you don't even know why. You gradually stop talking to someone and then you just don't see them at all. Maybe this is the Pisces in me, but that makes me terrified. I've had so many people that I've cared about in my life that, you know, they've gone in different life paths, they've moved, and we haven't kept in touch, whatever it is. Sometimes I get really sad over the fact that I might never see them again. And obviously that happens once you leave high school and middle school, but you don't feel it the same way when you go through a fight or when you're going from grade 6 to grade 7 and maybe you're not as close with this person. It's so different as a 20-something-year-old. Even when you're dating, you might go on an amazing first date and then the person just disappears. The world just becomes so much bigger, and it's a really good thing in some ways, and also it's really scary. Here's something to say. How am I supposed to finish the video and be all serious? I know, it's okay, sweetie. Trauma If you've lived in a household your whole life and you haven't known anything that's been different, or if you've been in a situation for a lot of your upbringing and you haven't known anything else besides that and that way of living, you will realize the trauma that you have, and you will have to pay for therapy to work through it. And a lot of the times, you know, you're not responsible for this trauma. You did not ask for this trauma. You did not ask to come in this world and have this trauma, but it is there, and it will follow you where you least expect it. It will follow you into your dating relationships, into your work life, into your relationship with yourself, how you talk to yourself. It is a lot to suddenly really feel as a 20-something-year-old, and this is different for everyone, but I think for a lot of people, they discover and work through their trauma in their 20s, because, you know, even when you're in college, you're in a formatted system, and then suddenly you're having to spend a lot of time alone, and you have the whole entire world at your fingertips, yet so much responsibility. A lot of the people I know discover and really understand that they had trauma in their 20s, or they even understand their trauma even more. It can come out everywhere where you least expect it, and when you have more control over your life and you spend more time alone, which is kind of an inevitable thing. Do you see my cats? They're like beating each other up in the back. I'm like being all serious and they're beating each other up. Boys, listen to your mommy. Anyways, essentially not only will you learn of this trauma that you might have not realized was there, but you will also have the pressure of having to unlearn that trauma. You will feel so angry because you didn't ask for this thing, but it is a big part of your life and you don't realize it. Hey, this one might be a controversial one. Sexualization. There is this pressure. It's kind of similar to what I was talking about in my second point, where you are in your 20s, you are supposed to be hooking up, you are supposed to be understanding yourself sexually. You should understand that completely. It's so hard for people to come out, especially in their mid to late 20s, because people expect you to know everything by that time, when everyone has a different clock, and it doesn't mean you're more or less mature, more or less, I don't know, cool. If you're caring about seeming cool in your 20s still, I feel like you're just automatically probably not a cool person to hang out with. Everyone has a different life path. You're supposed to be having all these hookups and understanding yourself, when for some people that's not how their dating works, and it's insanely lonely, and you're also still just trying to understand your body at the same time while it's still changing, and your weight fluctuates when you're 20, and you're dealing with not looking like a teenager anymore, and in a really disgusting world where lots of people prefer you looking like a teenager, it can be even scarier to look like a grown woman and not a teenager, because that is something that people will fetishize, keeping you looking young. It's not natural, and it is not fair to yourself to feel the need to not let yourself age, and feeling that guilt around aging and not looking like a teenager anymore. And it's so much all at once that you're supposed to understand and accept. You should be spending your weekends at a bar, which I refuse to do. I don't like bar settings. It's not where I see myself meeting someone as well, you know? And that's okay, but it is the thing that we grew up seeing in movies and TV shows, these 20-year-olds at a bar meeting someone, and listen, that's how some people meet people, but that's also not the only option, and you also don't have to rush to do anything or know anything or understand anything. This pressure to go out and be intimate with people almost scares you so much that it isolates you, especially for someone on the asexual spectrum. I have a bias here for sure, but you know, someone that really wants to emotionally know someone first is considered uncool and rare and is not as understood, especially in your 20s. You're supposed to be young and hooking up with a ton of people, but you also should have some sort of partner at all times that you can take with you places. And then, you know, you also see these people with these long-term relationships and you feel pressure there, or if you have neither of those things, you feel pressure. It's exhausting. Awareness. I feel like when you're in your 20s, you finally understand how corrupt things are in the world. And maybe some of you are really mature and you realize that at a young age. And I feel like you start to realize that when you're a teenager. But I think, you know, a lot of the times parents tried to hide that, or you had a privileged upbringing and you didn't really understand it, or you did have things that were dark around you, like that childhood trauma, and you didn't realize what was going on. Because I feel like when you're young, you tend to warp things and make them more tangible as a kid. That's something that kids do. I would tell funny stories about things that were extremely traumatic as a kid. That was how my kid brain took that information and processed it. Once you have the right to vote, you realize how important that is. You start to notice patterns where things in the world are corrupt for certain people, and it's really heartbreaking and stressful, and you don't know what to do with it. And these systems that you grew up with, you suddenly realize that they're corrupt and dark, and you can't help but be a little cynical about it. It can feel existential and scary. It's a new awareness. You see these microaggressions. These things aren't funny, these things aren't okay, and it's a really good thing because, you know, you feel empathy, but you also have so much more knowledge. I think for people that feel empathy, which hopefully everyone does, I think all my people do that watch this, I hope. I think for any person that feels empathy, you know, learning and discovering how unfair and unjust the world is, especially learning that you had this privilege that other people didn't, can be eye-opening and, you know, a lot of information. You suddenly are like, this world I grew up in, I did not understand at all, and that is a lot to handle. And that's why it can be nice to feel like your childhood self again. Anyways, I didn't mean to get negative in this video. I just wanted to rant about these things that are so beyond normal. I hope in this video you can feel permission to feel fear for these things and feel hurt and lost for other things. I feel like we're just expected to kind of get thrown with these insane changes in our lives and new pressures and just kind of go with it, but it's a lot and we're allowed to acknowledge that. So yeah, it's not just you, I promise. I'm gonna feature my people on the screen. I love you, I love my people, and your posts on the screen. Thank you so much for listening to me rant. I promise I'll make fun of a Barbie movie in the next video. I mean, make fun, admire. I freaking love Barbie, okay? Sorry I've been inactive, I had COVID. It was bad. Okay, I love you so much. And I hope this gave someone comfort, some sort of relatability and feeling of maybe like in this super lonely world right now for 20-year-olds, you know, maybe you felt a little less lonely knowing that you're not the only one that feels this way. So I love you. Bye. Follow you into a fire. Follow you into a life. And you taught me what not to be, what not to be. No, I'm sorry, I don't practice what you preach. And you